Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity Program, also known as SEED, at your organization.
I'm Anya.
And I'm Rhea.
And collectively, we host the Let's Dive into Diversity podcast. Your participation is greatly valued, and we thank you for being here today.
Before we begin with the questions, could you please introduce yourself and share with us like a brief overview of your like professional journey and current position? And we're eager to hear about your career path and who you are.
Sure. I am Wesley Ashley. I am a Little Rock native, born and raised. I went away from Little Rock for a while as an undergrad. I went to Texas A&M. I got an anthropology degree there. Came back to Little Rock, did some work in the museum world around here. That led me to law school, which led me to compliance for a hospital and university here locally. It's within that setting that I have picked up this extra duty or responsibility, let's call it, that's kind of outside of what I do professionally on a regular basis, but is more of a interest in my heart of, I think, a combination of both my legal training and my anthropology background and just my lived experience led me to SEED at my organization as both a participant and then a trained facilitator. So that's how I got there.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So we kind of wanted to go off of that and ask some questions. And the first one that we have prepared is, to start off, just so the audience knows, could you briefly summarize or describe what exactly the SEED program is and what it does for your organization?
Okay, so the SEED program, Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, is a program that really started out of another university, Wellesley, where it was really focused on having a safe space to have intimate conversations about sometimes difficult, sometimes uncomfortable conversations and topics. The point that we have bringing it to our institution is hopefully to take that message of having a diverse environment and having a inclusive environment can be done by having these kind of intimate conversations on a number of different identities. And so our hope is by having these kind of sit down conversations that we can affect change within the organization on an individual level.
Okay, so acknowledging the SEED program's commendable role in establishing a more equitable and like cooperative environment throughout the hospital, what specific topics or types of diversity do SEED seminars tend to emphasize or discuss, and why?
They really emphasize on the big ideas of what identity is. So we talk about race, we talk about gender, we talk about sexuality, but we also talk about other things that people identify with and identify as that really impact their personal journey. So things that were new to me were disability. I had never really contemplated it, but it's a huge identity that people carry with them that impact their day-to-day life. So we talk about housing equity and things like that, just how there are a lot of different identities and how people identify that aren't the stereotypical ways, but they still very much impact how someone walks through life and are very important to understand when thinking about having a table that seats everyone in your organization and can hear what they bring. It's important to, I think, understand all those different identities that we try to cover, and even those that we don't have the time to cover, to recognize and be, I guess, more culturally, I think the phrase is cultural humility is more of our goal of understanding that there are things out there that we don't understand, but we can be a better, both as an organization, as an individual, by just showing compassion.
That's really cool to hear about. And we were actually, while we were doing research on the program, one key attribute that really stood out to us was the role of facilitators in the SEED cohort, who lead the engaging and interactive exercises or dialogue using media like engaging films or literature rather than just like straight lecturing. And so we wanted to elaborate exactly how do facilitators or people implement this, and how do you think the cohorts respond to and improve from the facilitators' more creative tactics in opposition to just kind of giving a speech?
That's a great question. And I say it's a great question because I, as a facilitator, find myself leaning hard into the use of art.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm not necessarily an artist, but I do consume a lot of art. And
Mhm.
so I get excited when I can see art that has this message and we can use it and bring it into our seminars. And it ranges really based on the topic. So we start last year's cohort, we started with the reading of the inaugural poem that Maya Angelou wrote and read at Bill Clinton's first inauguration. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I would say go back and look at it. It's On the Breaking of Dawn, I believe it's what it's called. And it's an amazing poem, and it touches on so many components of seed. When we had a uh, gender and sexual violence cohort one year, we used a song from Courtney Barnett, which was really cool, and it had some Handmaid's Tale components to it, and some phrases that I saw a lot of women connect to, and I think a lot of men were necessarily, I wouldn't say necessarily, but we're often blind to. There's a phrase in one of the songs and some graphics about being a woman walking around in a park with your keys in your fist and being prepared to to defend yourself. So we cover art in as many ways as we can on a topic. We bring in videos and lectures from artists who also engage on social equity issues. So um, how our participants respond to it, I hope well. I may be a little biased because I lean so hard into the music and the art. But I think generally the people who come to our sessions enjoy. We kind of try to bookend the sessions with music at the front and the end, kind of thematically, and have artists and artworks within it throughout the session. I hope
Yeah,
that answers.
thank you for that answer. We think that like the program's approach is like really unique, and utilizing art to convey the message is more thought-provoking and engaging, which brings us to our next question. So as a seminar-based program, SEED evidently promotes safe spaces, as you said, and crucial conversations surrounding race, gender, socioeconomic status, religion, and other diverse backgrounds throughout the organization. In your previous experience with SEED, are there any issues and subjects that most participants prior to SEED had little to no awareness of and now possess like extensive knowledge in? If so, could you please elaborate on those?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we are out there lecturing and increasing anyone's extensive knowledge. I would say we're out there having conversations, and based on the lived experiences of the participants, we have reached some areas where others aren't. We use this tool called windows and mirrors a lot. We can have a conversation and the three of us, and we might have similarities on some things, and that would be considered uh, windows, or sorry, mirrors. And then things that are new to us, we are seeing as windows. So I think we find those conversations and using that kind of tool leads people to, again, more cultural humility and better understanding. Oh, despite these differences in these areas, we're still pretty much the same and we can work together to solve problems.
I think that's a really cool strategy that I mean, part of the reason why we started this podcast is because we recently founded our diversity council. So I think windows and mirrors would definitely be a cool tactic that we can try introducing in our own school.
Yeah.
And we also wanted to ask, so we know that SEED promotes the exchange of diverse perspectives regarding important issues and topics comprehensively affecting almost everyone like at the organization. So could you please elaborate on the significance and importance of exposing healthcare workers and just people in the workplace in general to diverse perspectives and new concepts that might not be prevalent in their life?
Sure. As a institution of higher learning and as a institution of health, it's very important, I think, that we broaden people's perspectives, both in who they're treating and who they're working with. And that's the value I have in the program, and that's why I put so much of my time and energy outside of my normal lane over there into it. So, yeah, I hope, does that answer what you're, okay.
Yeah. And kind of going off of that, we saw on your website, the C's website, numerous participants from past cohorts have referenced the program's ability to both improve their self-reflection on their own identities and backgrounds, as alongside its ability to promote others' awareness and cultural humility regarding external topics that may be foreign to them. So commenting on this helpful aspect that promotes such humility throughout the hospital, how does SEED encourage this like kind of educational and vulnerable as well as like supportive safe space within its seminars?
Yeah, I mean, it's the facilitators, honestly. And I learned that as a participant first, and then going through the National Seed program as a facilitator. The facilitator training was one of the more impactful things I've had in my life as an adult. And I think the ability of the facilitators and the training that we get to know how to share our experiences and practice self-care, because it is a very important component to sharing yourself for educational purposes. I think by doing that, though, and out the gate, I should say, we shock our participants sometimes at how open and vulnerable we are willing to be. And because of that, they tend to feel safer and more willing and ready to share. I think we ease into it as well. We start on topics like the name story as opposed to a specific identity. So we'll hear everyone's story of how they got the name that they got as a person, and then you hear, despite everywhere in the world where everyone in that room came from, you hear some common themes. And I think by getting to know our co-participants as well, it just kind of builds from there. We always say trust the process. It's the process.
Definitely. So another piece of positive feedback that we found while we were researching was that a past participant discussed how it helped unify the hospital and kind of address the siloed and fractured ecosystem, forcing individuals to leave their own closed like echo chambers of monotone perspectives and opinions and exposing them to more diversity. And so we wanted to ask, what would you say would be a beneficial and proactive policy to implement to prevent these echo chambers throughout the hospital and also just in society from forming in the first place?
Wow. Okay. So, you know, we have this perennial debate, I think, of whether or not there should be a policy to require this kind of training. And it really depends. And I hate to sound like an attorney, but it depends. The more there are great studies and research that show the more you force someone to do something, the less open they are to doing it. So, you know, I write a lot of policy where I'm at as well. And I just don't know if there is a policy that would strengthen the effort per se. I think there is just a visible culture that would allow that. So if you see, you know, leadership and down participating in these courses and these conversations and not being in a siloed bubble publicly, then I think the institution and the participants elsewhere get that message. So one of the hardest things about SEED, though, is inherently we run into a class kind of structure because not everyone has the privilege to take some time out of their day to come to these courses or these sessions. There are lots of folks who wish they could, and we wish we could have them, but the way their job is structured does not allow for them to get there. And that is definitely often based on a kind of socioeconomic class issue.
So there are kind of like socioeconomic factors playing in it, as well as like them being able to voluntarily like attend or become part of the cohort. That
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So that, huh?
So
Oh,
we've tried to accommodate that by having some sessions that are after hours,
mhm.
but also after a long day of work,
Yeah.
just run into that being a barrier.
That actually kind of goes hand in hand with our next question that we prepared, which is what is like the typical composition of the program's constructive dialogue sessions or seminars and general cohorts? So, like, are there any outreach efforts? I know you mentioned the after hours one, which was a good
Mhm.
policy, to communities who are not as represented within the SEED program or unable to.
Let me say it this way. Yes, and we have actively sought people who represent the majority to
Mhm.
join.
And we also wanted to ask, as a result of the implementation of SEED throughout the organization, what notable changes or progress have you seen in the institution's dynamic, diversity, and inclusivity? Are the hospital's workplace and faculty more welcomed and unified, would you say, like on a general basis?
So that's really hard for us to gauge, and we have that conversation of what are we tracking, and what data do we go back to look at to show progress. We've talked about surveys and things like that. I can tell you anecdotally, I hear from people that I run into the halls. One, I know people now that I would never have known. And then I run into people in the halls who share random stories about how seed impacted their life, either professionally or at home. One of the coolest things to me is when I hear folks say they took something from seed and they shared it with their kids. So it makes me super excited to hear that people are not only taking the stuff and applying it at work, but potentially even at home, because to me that creates a bigger impact.
Mhm. So the program definitely has a broad impact and definitely promotes like inclusivity and cultural humility, as we mentioned. So as a facilitator, what are some of your goals or future objectives for the C program in general? Are there any changes that you'd like to see throughout the program?
I mean, I would love to have more facilitators and more time in the day to do the work. We are taking a trip this summer. Before I give you the wrong acronym, which I'm horrible with, I think it's ELJ, the equal, no, EJL, Equal Justice, EGI, Equal Justice Institute, I believe, in Alabama, where they have the lynching memorial. We're taking a group trip there to have that experience together, kind of as like a facilitator bonding moment. So, I mean, that's our goal, is to just keep taking care of each other and ourselves and trying to keep our energy in place and strong and keep going.
So overall, this sounds like a really amazing program with some really amazing impact and intentions. And we just wanted to kind of wrap up the interview by asking if you could elaborate on any personal takeaways and crucial information that you gained due to being involved with SEED and discussing it with your peers.
Wow, that's a great question. Every year, every session, I learn something new, not only about myself, but about people in general. Like I said earlier, I originally studied anthropology. I was more of the bones dude, so I didn't really honestly care for people all that much in culture. And it's been later in life as an adult, and it's been really cool. I mean, it's made me, one, just reflect more myself and slow down and think before I find myself doing the things that anger me about other people when they do them to me. So, yeah, it's just been constant growth for me. So that's probably what I get out of it. That's kind of selfish. It's helpful for me. Like I said, I learn from every person who comes into one of our cohorts. It makes me check my own personal bias about things that I may or may not be aware of.
Thank you so much for your thorough answers and insight on our questions and joining us this Saturday afternoon. Your time and participation mean a lot to us, and we're really grateful for your presence and participation in this program.
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to get your email and so excited for this podcast. You guys are awesome.
Same. We'll make sure to send you the episode.
Thank you.
Let's